Welcome. Have you ever had a client walk into your office or call you on the phone telling you about an IRS letter or notice that they received and asking you the question, is this something I need to worry about? Well, not all IRS notices and letters are created equal. And if you ignore the wrong one, you could cost your client everything. So today, what we're going to talk about on Let's Talk Taxes Tuesday, we're going to decode the IRS notices so you know which ones are the most important ones that you need to keep an eye out for your client and what they mean and how you need to respond to them. So let's get started. Welcome again to another episode of Let's Talk Taxes Tuesday. I am so excited that you have decided to join us today, and we want to jump right into these IRS notices, right? And keep in mind, as a IRS tax representation specialist, notice is one of the main things that's a driver that we have to keep our eye on because it establishes a timeline of events, a timeline of actions that need to be taking place as we move along this journey to resolve our client's tax debt. Because the big picture is that the IRS sends out over 200 different types of notices. But at the end of the day, there are going to be three main, most common notices that kind of dominate the collection process. And so you want to think of these three notices as kind of like the warning signs. There's different warning levels, okay? So this first one that we're going to deal with is called the CP14. This is the IRS letter CP14. And this is the letter, number one, what is this letter? This is the balance due letter. This is the letter that usually your client receives first after they have filed their tax return and it's a balance due and they didn't send in any payments. Well, the IRS is required by the Internal Revenue Code 6303 that if within 60 days of them assessing the tax based upon your return that you sent, they have to send you this balance due notice. So that's basically what this is. It's a balance due notice. And I do want to show you right quick. Let me share my screen so that I can show you right quick. Okay. So yeah, if you can see my screen right here, this is what the notice would look like, right? So it has here the IRS, so let you know that, hey, this is an official letter. It's going to have your client's name up here. But most important, right here, it says notice, and it lets you know that CP14, this is the type of letter that your client has received. So even if your client has called you on the phone, you can always direct them to the top right-hand corner where it says notice to let them know to tell you what it says up here. And if it says CP14, you automatically know that you're dealing with just a balance due notice from the IRS. And again, I'm not going to go over the whole notice, but I just wanted to show for all those people that may be new to IRS tax representation what an actual CP14 looks like. But here again, it's going to tell your client and tell you how much they owe. It's going to show the specific year. Here we have for year 2017, and it's saying that the client owes $1,075.21. And then over here, which you definitely want to pay attention to, it itemizes the penalties that are assessed to the client. Because remember, this is one of the big things that is usually causes your client's bill to escalate is the various different types of penalties and interest that are assessed to your client, right? So this is just a general idea of what this looks like. I wanted to kind of show you that right there. So that is our CP14. It's basically a balance due notice. The IRS is just basically staking a claim, planting their flag, right, in the ground saying, hey, you owe us. We know that you owe us, and we're putting you on notice that we know that you owe us a certain amount of money. So that's the CP14. The next notice we want to make sure that we are aware of is the CP504. Now, this isn't necessarily the next notice in the sequence because there is a CP501, a CP503 that comes in between here, right? But This is the notice that you really want to start to pay attention to, the CP 504. Now, this is what I call the serious warning notice. Okay, the serious warning notice, because what it's going to say is this is going to be a notice of intent to levy. The IRS is basically putting your client on notice. We're going to take your stuff, your stuff. It's called a notice of intent to levy, right? And the IRS basically explains in this letter that after it has given you notice of this, that it can begin to start to see some of your client's assets. For example, state tax refunds that your client might be due. Once the IRS sends this notice out, they are able to take the refunds. Now, they are not able, based upon this notice, to garnish your client's wages or to levy their bank account and some other assets. But this is a serious warning that you want to take notice of if your client says that they have received a CP 504. And again, I want to share my screen and give you a picture of what this particular notice looks like. Let me make sure I get the right one. Okay, here it is. All right, so this is the CP 504. And again, as you see here, up the notice name is CP 504. It tells you what the notice date is, which is something that's very important, right? Because according to the Internal Revenue Code, specifically 6331D, right, in Internal Revenue Code, this is the notice that has to be sent out at least 30 days before the IRS starts levying your client's stuff. In other words, in 30 days, at least 30 days before they start taking your client's, let's say, state tax refund. Okay, so this creates an urgency, right, for your client. This creates this type of urgency for you because it's like a serious warning. And really, the language is really designed to invoke fear in your clients, to try to put a fire under them, to get them to start to move to resolve this, right? And a lot of times we'll have clients come into our office when they receive this notice, right? Because that fear has been ignited in them, right? But as you can see here, it says a final balance, reminder, and notice of intent to seize and levy your property and your rights to property. And then all of this is very bold. It also has real bold on here. It's telling you, your client, how much they are owed. In this particular example, it says that they are owed $74,135.51. And then it goes in here, it has several pages, but basically it goes in here and lays out what your client can do after that. And you all will begin to proceed. So let me stop sharing my screen here. And again, what you want to do with this, you want to be able to institute some type of measure to begin to resolve your client's tax debt, is to make sure that they are in compliance as well, to be able to stop or seize some of these penalties, which have begun to snowball, right? Right, snowball, and makes your client's balance continually increase. Right, so that's the CP 504. Take it as a serious warning, and we just went over what you would need to do to try to resolve that for your client at that stage of the game. Now, the next stage that I definitely want to bring to your attention, the next notice that will go out will be in LT11. At 11 is basically like the sirens are going off. When your client receives an 11 from the IRS, that should be like bullhorns going off, sirens is going off. Why? Because it is the final notice of intent to levy, the final notice that we're taking your assets, and it starts, the 30-day clock starts rolling, in which your client has 30 days to pay this off, enter into some type of agreement where they have resolved this, or request a CDP hearing. And a CDP hearing is just a collection due process hearing. But those 30 days start tolling when your client receives this particular letter. So you don't want to miss this, because if you miss this, then the IRS will start instituting procedures to garnish your client's wages, freeze their bank account, right, and begin to take their stuff. What we have here is basically what we said. This is a final notice of intent to levy. This is puts out the siren sign, and you want to make sure if your client calls you about this or comes into your office with this particular notice, usually my procedure, if this is the first time I'm seeing this client, I'm usually going to go ahead and submit a request for a CDP hearing, because we are requesting a hearing. It preserves your client's rights to be able to challenge, right? If they feel like they have a basis to challenge any type of levy that may take place, stop any levy from coming on while your client's request is being considered about a CDP hearing. And it also preserves your client's rights for appeal to the tax court. Very, very important. So if your client does not make the deadline, your client can lose everything. And if you do not secure your client's rights with a CDP hearing, or your client has not paid it off within this 30-day period, you jeopardize your client losing everything. And this is not something that you wanted to do, okay? So the LT11 is definitely a serious letter that you want to take heed to and begin to take some action, right? So those are the three main, most common notices, collection notices that are sent out by the IRS. The CP14, which is basically a balance due notice. The CP504, which is basically a serious warning, letting you know, hey, this is a notice that we're about to take your stuff. And then the LT11, which is the most serious notice, which says, hey, this is your final notice. We're going to take your stuff. And your client has 30 days to respond or to request a CDP hearing to resolve the issue. So that's what we have. I hope this was beneficial to you. And so the next time that a client walks in your office, right, with a notice, you will know whether it's just the beginning of the process or if it's towards the end of the process, and you will know how serious your response needs to be and how quickly you need to respond. So I want to thank you for joining me today for another episode of Let's Talk Taxes Too. And I hope that you got benefit from the information that we provided today. Give me some comments. Let me know what other topics that you would like to learn more about in the comments section. And make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you are notified every time we drop an episode. And if you like what you heard here and you gained a lot of information, make sure you join us for Tax Magic Live. I'm going to drop the link in this comments for you. And I hope you have a very prosperous day. Bye.